I never thought a night at Walmart could be so horrible. My shift started as a normal, low-key night shift. The family store where I worked as a security guard closed at 10 p.m., but my work was just beginning. I was new to this night crew and had no idea what I was signing up for. The evening began as usual, checking cameras, inspecting the territory, and organizing documents. I did my inspection, closed all the main entrances, and for the first time in my life, I had a strange feeling. It was like something was wrong. The silence around was unpleasant. The first hours passed uneventfully, but with every minute the silence grew deeper and deeper. In the middle of the night, when the clock struck 3, I heard a strange sound coming from the spare warehouse. It was no ordinary noise, it was like the screeching of metal. I decided to check, and when I went inside, I saw that all the boxes were scattered around the floor. My first impulse was to check the camera footage, but when I got to the monitors, they weren't working. Explosions, sparks, and then absolute darkness. After I spent a few minutes rebooting the system, I realized that the situation had become even worse. My only choice was to go back to the warehouse and try to find out what was going on. I could feel cold sweat running down my back, but I had to go on. When I returned to the warehouse, I saw something that turned my perception of reality upside down. On the floor, among the scattered boxes, lay a human part. I couldn't figure out what it could be. My fingers were shaking, and I heard the same strange sound again, as if someone or something was pulling hard towards me. The moment when I realized that this was not just simple vandalism or a malfunction of the equipment, but something much more terrible, was the longest in my life. I picked up my walkie-talkie and started calling the control room, but there was no answer. Something did not give me peace, and I decided to make a survey of the territory on my own. I knew I had to be careful, because this situation could be dangerous. When I returned to the warehouse in the darkness, I saw several footprints on the floor. They were red and led to the back of the warehouse where there had never been any tracks before. I could feel my heart beating faster, but I decided to follow them. The tracks led to an old office space that had not been used for a long time. I opened the door and saw something inside that made me remember every moment of that night. There were old documents on the table, scattered all over the room, but what was most frightening, a phrase was written in blood on the wall. "They are already here." My mind started playing with my consciousness. I began to feel that something was watching me. I turned around, and again I heard the same sound, as if something was reaching out to me from the darkness. I decided to check this room out further. Under one of the shelves, I noticed something shiny. I bent down and saw a small box covered in dust. When I opened it, it turned out that there was an old photo card inside. On it was a picture of several people who looked like the old guards of this store. But one of them was particularly terrifying. His face was blurred and seemed to dissolve in the darkness. I quickly returned to my guard post, trying not to think about what I had just seen. My hands were shaking and I kept following the cameras. Again, the screen was black. I knew something serious was going on, but I couldn't imagine what it was. That night I fell asleep as a security guard, not understanding why my night at Walmart had turned into a real nightmare. When I woke up, everything seemed to be in place. The cameras were working again, but the footprints and blood on the floor were gone as if they had never been there. I tried to calm down and decided that everything I saw could be the result of fatigue and stress. However, the next few nights were no less terrifying. Constant noises from the warehouse, strange signals on the radio, and even flashes of unfamiliar faces on the cameras made me understand that something was wrong. My next change was particularly strange. I started to notice that some items in the store were disappearing or moving on their own. When I checked the inventory, I found that some products and items were scattered in places where they had never been before. Every time I tried to ask my colleagues about this, they just shrugged and said it depends on the cameras. But the cameras always seemed to show empty passages in the silence of the night. One night, I heard those horrible sounds from the warehouse again. I walked over to the door and noticed it was slightly ajar. He headed inside again, trying not to think about what happened the night before. And then I saw the same tracks again, but this time they did not lead to the old office space, but to a new part of the warehouse where nothing special was ever stored. I decided to check this part out, and what I found made me wonder if I could even hope for a normal life after this. I tried not to think about what was going on at Walmart, but the more I researched, the more I realized it was more than just bullying. After I saw those tracks, my nights became a real nightmare. I hoped that I could find an explanation for all of this, but every time I returned to the warehouse, the situation only got worse. That night, when I returned to the warehouse, I stumbled upon a new piece of this terrible puzzle. A small package was lying on the floor, tied with a rope and marked with a red marker. It was closed, and I couldn't figure out why this package was here. I began to feel a throbbing of anxiety. I didn't want to touch the package, but I knew I had to find out what was in it. I carefully opened the package and found some old photos inside. All the photos were black and white, with images of people in unusual situations. But one particular photo scared me the most. It depicted my own guard post, and in the corner stood a man whose features were blurred and indistinct. I immediately felt that this person might have been there in the store, and that he might have been watching me all this time. I tried to contact the control room, but again got no response. It was the night shift, and I was alone with this horrible world. That evening, I decided to do another review. I walked through all the areas of the warehouse, checking every corner. When I returned to the main part of the store, I noticed that some of the products had been moved and the floor was once again marked. There was a cold breeze, as if something or someone was moving inside the store. I decided to follow the tracks and again ended up in the same room where the old documents were. This time I found another package similar to the previous one. There were other old things in it, but there was also a note written in blood. It read, "He knows you're looking for him." My nerves were on the verge of breaking down. The more I learned, the less I understood what was going on. It's not just a nightmare. This is something real and scary, and I had to find ways to protect myself and reveal the truth. Every time I began to think that nothing could surprise me anymore, I was faced with a new horror. Each night became more and more disturbing. I tried to get help, but every time I tried to tell my colleagues what was going on, they just laughed at me or said it was just normal stress. One day when I was checking the cameras, I saw something that made me freeze in place. On one of the monitors, I saw a dark figure moving around the warehouse. She looked like something vague and ugly. The figure seemed to move not in a straight line, but as if floating in the air. I decided to go check out what kind of figure it was. I didn't know what exactly was waiting for me, but I had a feeling that it was something very dangerous. I took my flashlight with me and headed into the warehouse, trying not to think about what I might find. As I approached the warehouse, I could feel the air getting colder. When I got inside, I saw that everything looked as usual. Boxes were scattered, but nothing special. I checked all corners and found nothing but the usual chaos. I returned to my guard post, deciding that it might be an illusion or the result of fatigue. But after a few hours, when I returned to the monitors, I saw another figure on one of them, this time closer to the cameras. It seemed like a shadow or a monster, and every time I tried to focus the camera on it, the image was blurry and uncertain. That evening, I tried to call for help again, but it turned out that my phone calls and radio communications were blocked again. I was alone with this unknown terror, and it seems that the answer was closer than I thought. My nights became even more intense after seeing that monstrous figure on the monitors. I couldn't find any logical explanation for what was happening, and even the thought that I might be facing something real and dangerous made me uneasy. In the morning, after another sleepless night, I decided to look at the old camera recordings, hoping to find at least some evidence of what was happening in the store. I listened to several hours of video footage but could find nothing but the usual night shadows and sounds. I continued to work, trying to stay calm, but the feeling of anxiety never went away. Every time I checked to see if I was okay, I could feel the darkness around me getting thicker and more unpleasant. One evening, when I did another survey of the warehouse, I came across something that really scared me. There was a large, dark stain on one of the walls that looked like a mark from something heavy. I got closer and noticed that it was not just a stain, but something like shadows that moved along the wall as if they were alive. I tried not to think about what it could be. I took the flashlight again and tried to find any explanations. When I shone the light on the wall, I saw that the dark marks seemed to form distinct shapes and symbols, but none of them were familiar to me. It looked like something coming out of the darkness, and I realized that it could be very important. I tried to contact the control room again, but all I got was silence. I was completely alone, and it seems that this terrible place began to take real forms. At every moment, I felt that someone or something was watching me. The next day, I found an old article about Walmart that mentioned a great tragedy that happened at that location years ago. It turned out that the former bodyguard was blamed for the disappearance of several people, a tragedy that was never fully solved. I realized that maybe this story could have something to do with what is happening now. At night, I returned to the warehouse trying to contact the other guards, but without success. I was convinced that I had to find a way to understand what was going on and why this place had become so scary. That night, I decided to check out all the unusual places in the store, and one of those areas was the frozen food refrigerator. When I entered, I felt an immediately palpable chill that was too strong even for this place. It was dark and quiet in the refrigerator, and only the sound of my footsteps echoed in this icy desert. I was looking through the shelves of frozen food when I suddenly noticed something unusual. One of the freezer doors was open a little more than usual. I went to it and saw that there was something inside, covered with a freezer bag. I tried to look closely, but suddenly my heart beat faster when I saw strange, fuzzy figures that seemed to be moving inside the freezer. They were like a film or shadows that danced inside the ice container. I decided to quickly get out of the fridge, but when I turned to the exit, I noticed that the door was closed behind me. I tried to open them, but they were locked from the inside. I could feel the panic begin to wash over me. I pulled out my flashlight and started banging on the door, hoping someone would hear my screams. It took several minutes before I managed to get out. I was breathless and scared. All of these elements, along with the strange sounds and figures I was seeing, assured that I was getting closer to solving this terrible mystery. My anxiety grew day by day, and I decided to dig deeper into the old documents I found in the secret room. It was clear to me that these papers could provide important clues about what was going on in the store. Among the documents, I came across several reports of anomalous events that had happened here over the years. One of the reports described the disappearance of security guards who worked in the store. Here is an excerpt from that report. According to our records, several guards have disappeared without a trace, and their jobs have been left empty. No one can explain why this happened, but there are suspicions that there is more to it than just random disappearances. This report made me wonder if some of the missing guards are some kind of invisible witnesses to what is happening now. I felt that I needed to learn more about these disappearances in order to understand what exactly was threatening this place. I also found some obscure maps that marked different areas of the store with red signs. They pointed to places where anomalous events took place. One such place was located close to an old warehouse where I had noticed strange tracks before. When I returned to the warehouse, I watched the camera footage and noticed that at a certain point some strange anomalies appeared, like a distortion of the visual image. It looked like some extremely mysterious figures that quickly disappeared when I tried to catch them. I decided to check these places out for myself. In the morning, when I managed to get into the warehouse, I began to thoroughly explore these areas. I found something shocking. There were some old holes and cracks in the floor that looked like they could be parts of old security systems that had been removed or destroyed. One such place was under a large pile of boxes. I carefully removed the boxes and found a small door that led to a dark underground part of the warehouse. My anxiety was building, but I knew I had to check this place out to find out more. I started down the stairs and felt the air getting even colder. The light from my flashlight scattered the darkness, and I began to notice that the walls were covered with old graffiti and notes. Some of them contained scary messages. "They'll be back." "Don't trust the darkness. It won't end." I continued to explore this underground space and found several old rooms that looked like they hadn't been used in decades. In one of the rooms, there were old laboratory equipment and incomprehensible devices. I had a feeling this part of the warehouse was part of some old covert operation. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound, like a rustling sound coming from one of those old appliances. I got closer and saw that one of the devices started flashing and outputting strange symbols. It was like some kind of message that I couldn't understand. I decided that I needed to find a way to decipher these symbols and understand what they meant. I also understood that I was getting closer to solving this mystery, but with each new discovery, my anxiety only increased. In the evening, I returned to the shop to find that the electricity had started to fail. The lights flickered, and I could hear the constant hum of the old electrical systems. I decided to see if this could be the result of some kind of electrical problem, or if it was part of what was going on in the store. I checked the electrical panels and found that some of them looked old and worn. I tried to fix the system, but when I opened one of the panels, I noticed that the wire was connected to some strange devices that were not part of the normal electrical system. These devices seemed to be part of some old security system or control mechanism that had been destroyed or left in this state. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it looked like someone was trying to hide it from view. At night, during another inspection of the cameras, I noticed that the same strange anomalies appeared again on the video. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it looked like moving objects that scattered in the darkness. I decided to leave a few cameras recording in the most suspicious areas, hoping that this would help me figure out what was going on in the store. I also continued to check the documents, hoping to find new clues. The next day, while looking through old documents, I came across a record of emergency situations that occurred in the store. In one of the records, it was mentioned about strange phenomena that were not subject to the usual explanation. I read an account of how during one of the accidents, several people disappeared, and there was mention of strange sounds and distortions in reality. This record was accompanied by old photographs, which depicted unknown symbols and incomprehensible phenomena. I realized that these documents could have given more information about what is happening now. I continued to examine these documents, and each new entry only increased my sense of unease. I realized that this story could be much more complicated and dangerous than I could imagine. Solving this mystery became more and more important, and I understood that I had to continue my research to find the answers to all the questions. Each new piece of the puzzle brought more fear, but also more determination to find out the truth. At night, after checking the old documents, I decided to check out the mirror room, which I had not yet explored. There were some old mirrors in the shop that didn't seem to have ever been used. I've heard that old mirrors can have special energies, or even secrets. I turned on the light in the room and started checking the mirrors one by one. Most of them were covered in dust and looked like they hadn't been touched in years. However, one mirror, large and decorative, immediately caught my attention. Its surface was slightly darkened and looked as if something had been written on it. I got closer and saw strange symbols on the mirror that looked like ancient signs. I couldn't figure out what it could mean, but it looked like part of a larger code or cipher. I decided to take a few photos to study them in more detail later. When I returned to the guard's post and looked at the photos on the computer, I noticed something strange. I saw my reflection in one of the photos, but it looked a little different. My face was shadowed and distorted, as if something or someone had tried to penetrate through the mirror. This moment made me feel like I was being watched. I decided to check all the mirrors in the store again, but I didn't find anything new. My anxiety was building and I felt trapped. The next day, I received information about new disappearances of people who worked in the store before. These were cases that were never investigated or made public. I found several more old records of these disappearances in the archives, and they all had one common motif. Each disappearance was related to strange events or anomalies occurring in the store. I also found a record of one of the guards who disappeared a few years ago. This guardian was known for his attachment to old rites and rituals. The recording mentioned that before he disappeared, he was seen performing strange rituals in the underground parts of the store. I began to wonder if this might be part of the puzzle. Perhaps these disappearances were related to some old beliefs or rituals used to control the situation. I decided to explore the underground parts of the store again and see if there were any traces or signs that might indicate these rituals. My anxiety only grew, but I knew I needed to know the truth. I returned to the underground part of the warehouse, trying to find new clues. I explored the old labs and came across several items that looked like parts of rituals. Old candles, books with strange symbols, and even bowls that looked like ritual items. I decided to check out one of the books, and when I opened it, I found it was written in an ancient language I couldn't understand. However, some of the symbols were similar to what I saw on the mirror. I decided to try to translate some of the text, hoping to find something useful. After a few hours of work, I realized that the book contained instructions for rituals that were aimed at summoning or controlling unseen forces. The book also stated that these rituals could be used to control space and time, creating anomalous phenomena. This could explain why such strange events were happening in the shop. My anxiety was building, but I felt that I was getting closer to the solution. I had to find more information about these rituals and understand how they could be related to what is happening now. I continued my research and decided to put more cameras in the underground part of the warehouse. I wanted to be sure that I wouldn't miss any detail and that I would be able to detect any new developments or anomalies. In the evening, I was reviewing the recordings from the cameras and noticed that some of them started to show strange distortions again. I also noticed that, at a certain point in the video, strange figures appear, moving quickly in the dark. I decided to leave a few cameras recording in the most suspicious areas, hoping to find new clues. I also decided to check if these figures in the video could somehow be connected to the rituals I learned about in the book. This situation was becoming more and more difficult and dangerous, but I understood that I needed to find answers. I decided to continue my research and try to solve all the secrets hidden in this store. My attempts to unravel the store's mysteries led to even greater mysteries. One morning, I received a message about strange signals appearing on the monitoring system. The signals were similar to disturbances in the electrical system, but their origin remained unknown. I headed to the server room to check out the hardware. When I opened the door, I felt the temperature drop sharply. The lights flickered, and I began to notice disturbing noises coming from behind the walls. I checked the monitoring systems and noticed that the signals matched the anomaly graphs I had seen before. On one of the monitors, I saw figures moving around the warehouse, similar to those that appeared in the video. I began looking through the records and realized that these figures were associated with certain areas of the warehouse where I had previously found strange symbols and ritual objects. When I returned to the archives, I decided to find out more about the missing guardian who performed the rituals. I found additional information about him. He was a member of an occult organization that practiced ancient rituals to control unseen forces. I learned that this organization was known for its interest in manipulating space and time. I also found several records of how this organization used old security systems to hide their rituals and manipulations. This information helped me understand why some of the systems in the store were messed up. Perhaps these systems were part of an old space control plan that had been reactivated. One evening, I was working on checking the cameras in the underground areas when I suddenly heard strange sounds that sounded like gunshots. I went to where I heard the noises and saw that some old lab equipment had started to emit strange signals. I found an old pistol lying nearby and some cartridges. It was strange. The gun and cartridges looked like part of an old weapon that could have been used for rituals. I could not understand how it all connected, but I understood that the situation was becoming more and more dangerous. After the incident with the gun, I decided to see if there were any clues that might indicate what was going on in the underground areas. I found several tracks that led to old tunnels and corridors that I didn't know about before. These tracks were old and looked like they had been left a long time ago. I followed them and came across a secret room that looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. Old documents were scattered in the room, some of which had been destroyed or damaged. I found one document that talked about how underground parts were used to hide unknown experiments. This confirmed my suspicions that the shop was used for more than just trading goods. In the underground parts, I again began to notice strange figures appearing and disappearing in the darkness. I tried to follow them, but they were too fast and elusive. It looked as if something or someone was trying to escape observation. I decided to install additional cameras and use infrared imaging to try to capture these shapes. In the process of checking, I came across new anomalies that started to appear again in certain areas of the store. While inspecting the underground part, I came across an old archive where records of experiments and rituals were kept. I found records that contained detailed descriptions of techniques for manipulating space and time. The records mentioned that these techniques were used to create anomalous phenomena that could be used to control people or even reality. This explained some of the strange occurrences I observed in the store. I realized that solving this mystery is becoming more and more difficult. I needed to find more information and understand how these rituals and experiments were related to what was happening now. One night, while checking the camera footage, I heard strange noises coming from the walls. It was a thump that seemed out of this world. I went to the place where I heard these sounds and started to investigate. I found strange cracks in the walls and noticed that cold air was coming out of them. When I expanded the cracks, I came across old pipes and cables that looked like part of an old security system. What struck me was that these pipes and cables were part of what looked like an old ritual mechanism. This confirmed my suspicions that the store was being used for something much darker and more complex. I continued to research and realized that much of what I found was part of a grand scheme. The rituals and experiments carried out in the shop were part of a larger plan. I found new documents that showed that these experiments were intended to create new forms of reality control. This explained why such strange events took place in the shop. I decided to learn more about who is behind these experiments and rituals. My research showed that these were parts of a larger plan that involved influencing different aspects of life.